There are books that can change your life. Books that inspire revolutions. Books that change beliefs. Books that make you laugh, cry, or see the world differently. But what if there was a book that changed something far more intimate? What if every page you turned rewrote your own body? Imagine walking into an old library and finding a thick hardcover volume sitting alone on a shelf. Its binding is worn but pristine, as if hundreds of hands have touched it without leaving a mark. Embossed across the front in faded gold lettering are 4 simple words: The Encyclopedia of Common Diseases. Curiosity gets the better of you. You open to a chapter on migraines. Within minutes, a dull ache blooms behind your eyes. You flip ahead to pneumonia. Your chest begins to tighten. Your breathing becomes shallow. You convince yourself it's anxiety. Then you read about appendicitis, and suddenly, your abdomen hurts exactly where it should. The symptoms are real. The pain is real. The illness is real. And the only thing you did was read. Tonight, Witches and Wanderers, we're opening one of the SCP Foundation's most unsettling anomalies. A book with 1,500 pages. A book that never physically harms anyone. A book that simply tells you what's wrong, and then makes it true. Hello, and welcome back, Witches and Wanderers, to the Morbid Witch Podcast, where we explore myths, legends, folklore, cryptids, paranormal phenomena, internet horror, and the stories that linger long after the lights go out. I'm your host, Kari Murders. Tonight's subject comes from the collaborative world of the SCP Foundation, a fictional universe built around anomalous objects, impossible creatures, and organizations dedicated to containing them before they threaten humanity. While the SCP universe is a work of creative fiction, many of its entries have become modern horror classics because they prey on fears that feel disturbingly plausible. And few concepts are as quietly terrifying as SCP-1025. A single book, no monsters, no blood-stained corridors, no haunted dolls, just words on paper. Words that somehow convince the human body to betray itself. To all my witches and wanderers, thank you for joining me once again. Whether you're listening under blankets, driving through the night, or shelving books at your local library, I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time here. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment telling me which SCP you'd like covered next. And if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to rate the show. Every rating helps more listeners discover our little corner of the strange. You can find the Morbid Witch Podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeartRadio, and Pandora. Now, let's turn the first page. Within SCP lore, SCP-1025 appears almost disappointingly ordinary at first glance. It is described as a hard-covered medical encyclopedia, approximately 1,500 pages long. Its title, The Encyclopedia of Common Diseases, suggests nothing more sinister than a textbook that might sit forgotten in a doctor's waiting room or university library. Its pages contain descriptions of illnesses ranging from minor infections to severe neurological disorders. Each chapter explains symptoms, progression, treatment, and complications in clear medical language. Nothing about the writing appears unusual until someone reads it. The anomaly activates through comprehension rather than contact. Merely touching the book does nothing. Flipping through its pages without reading has no measurable effect. But once a person genuinely reads and understands an entry describing a disease, their body begins to manifest symptoms consistent with that condition. At first, the symptoms are often subtle: a cough, mild dizziness, fatigue, a tingling sensation in the hands or feet. But over time, they intensify, mirroring the disease described on the page with frightening accuracy. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect is that laboratory testing often fails to explain what's happening. The body behaves as though it is ill, even when the biological cause may be absent or impossible to identify. In some SCP accounts, victims develop nearly complete symptom profiles despite lacking the pathogens or injuries normally responsible. The implication is chilling. The book doesn't merely convince people they're sick. It somehow persuades reality itself. And every page offers another illness waiting to become real. One reason SCP-1025 resonates so deeply is because it exaggerates something that already exists in real life: the power of expectation over the human body. Many people have experienced reading about an illness online and suddenly becoming convinced they have it. A headache becomes a brain tumor. A muscle twitch becomes a neurological disorder. A harmless cough becomes evidence of something catastrophic. Psychologists even have names for these experiences. The nocebo effect describes situations where negative expectations produce genuine physical symptoms. Stress hormones rise, muscles tense, digestion changes, pain intensifies. The body responds to belief in measurable ways. SCP-1025 takes that very real phenomenon and pushes it into supernatural territory. Instead of anxiety creating temporary discomfort, belief becomes destiny. The body obeys the text as though the printed words are biological instructions. That idea strikes at something fundamental. How much of our health depends on what we think? How much power does the mind already possess? And if thought alone can influence physiology, where is the line between psychology and magic? The SCP never answers those questions. It simply leaves the book open, waiting for the next reader. Within the SCP Foundation's fictional universe, SCP-1025 is classified not because it is physically aggressive, but because of how deceptively harmless it appears. There are no claws to avoid, no containment breaches caused by brute force, and no visible signs of danger when looking at the book sitting quietly on a shelf. Its greatest weapon is curiosity, and curiosity is something almost impossible to contain. Imagine being a researcher assigned to study the object. You're told that reading it will make you sick, but you're also a scientist. You need evidence. Surely a few sentences couldn't hurt. Maybe previous researchers exaggerated the effects. Maybe there's a psychological explanation. You open the cover and begin reading. Within minutes, your throat feels scratchy. Within an hour, your joints ache. By the end of the day, you're requesting medical attention for symptoms that shouldn't exist. The Foundation's reports often imply that even when readers know exactly what SCP-1025 does, the effects still occur. Awareness provides no immunity. Logic offers no protection. The anomaly operates independently of belief, turning knowledge itself into the trigger. This creates a containment nightmare. How do you study an object when observing it directly activates it? Researchers must rely on controlled testing, indirect documentation, and strict protocols to minimize exposure. The book itself becomes less than a medical reference and more a dormant biological hazard, waiting for someone to satisfy their curiosity. Some fictional experiments suggest that subjects who only glance at illustrations experience nothing unusual. Others who skim headings remain unaffected. But once a person comprehends enough of the text to understand the disease being described, the process begins. It's as though SCP-1025 waits for understanding before rewriting the reader's body. And perhaps that's the most unsettling part. The danger isn't in touching the pages. The danger is learning from them. Picture a university library on a cold autumn evening. Most of the students have gone home. The fluorescent lights hum quietly above rows of forgotten reference books. A graduate student named Emma is searching for materials on historical medicine when she notices a massive hardcover volume tucked between anatomy texts. The Encyclopedia of Common Diseases. It looks old, but not ancient. Worn, but meticulously cared for. Curiosity wins. She opens to a chapter on seasonal influenza. The descriptions are surprisingly detailed. Fever, chills, body aches, dry cough, and fatigue. Emma smiles to herself, closes the book, and continues studying. An hour later, she shivers despite the heated building. By midnight, she's convinced she's coming down with something. The next morning, she returns the book, deciding she should rest. Before leaving, however, she flips to another page discussing labyrinthitis, fascinated by the explanation of dizziness and balance disorders. As she walks to her car, the parking lot seems uneven. The horizon tilts. Her stomach churns. She stumbles into a light pole. Doctors run tests. Blood work is normal. Imaging reveals nothing. Yet Emma can barely stand upright. Days later, while recovering at home, she searches online for explanations and remembers another condition she had briefly skimmed in the book. Insomnia. Within 48 hours, she hasn't slept. Then come tremors, then numbness, then migraines. Each symptom appears only after she recalls reading about it. Each diagnosis arrives before any doctor can identify a cause. Eventually, she stops researching entirely, stops reading medical websites, stops entering libraries, because somewhere deep inside, she fears the truth. The book didn't infect her. It taught her body how to be sick. Whether Emma's story is real or imagined doesn't matter, because after hearing it, how many of us would hesitate before opening an unfamiliar medical encyclopedia ever again? Before we continue, Witches and Wanderers, I want to take a moment to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. Whether you've been here since the very beginning, or this is your first episode, your support keeps the Morbid Witch Podcast alive. If you're enjoying tonight's exploration into SCP-1025, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment on YouTube. Tell me which SCP, cryptid, or mythological figure you'd like to hear about next. And if you're listening on Spotify, please consider leaving a rating. It only takes a moment. but it makes a huge difference in helping new listeners find the show. You can also listen on iHeartRadio and Pandora, so wherever you enjoy your podcasts. The Morbid Witch Podcast is there waiting for you. To all my witches and wanderers around the world, thank you for walking through the darkness with me. Now, let's see what happens when information itself becomes contagious. One of the reasons SCP-1025 unsettles readers so deeply is because it weaponizes something we normally celebrate: knowledge. Human civilization is built on the sharing of information. Libraries preserve it. Schools teach it. Doctors rely on it. Entire generations dedicate themselves to expanding it. SCP-1025 asks a horrifying question. What if learning could physically harm you? Not misinformation, not lies, not dangerous instructions, but truthful information itself. The book transforms education into infection. Every paragraph becomes a potential diagnosis. Every sentence becomes a loaded weapon pointed inward. This concept echoes ancient myths surrounding forbidden knowledge. Stories throughout history warn of scrolls that drive readers mad. Sacred texts that mortals cannot comprehend, and names so powerful they alter reality when spoken aloud. The SCP Foundation reimagines that ancient fear for the modern world. Today, we carry infinite information in our pockets. We search symptoms before seeing doctors. We diagnose ourselves through online articles, sometimes correctly, sometimes disastrously. SCP-1025 simply removes the line between imagination and reality. Read enough, and your body obeys. Of course, SCP-1025 is a work of fiction. There is no verified medical encyclopedia capable of spontaneously creating diseases through reading alone, but reading often reflects genuine anxieties, and this anomaly taps into fears that are surprisingly real. Medical students occasionally joke about medical student syndrome, where learning about illnesses leads them to believe they have every condition they're studying. Psychologists have documented nocebo effects, in which expectations produce measurable physical symptoms. Stress alone can elevate blood pressure, suppress immune function, disrupt digestion, and create pain that feels entirely authentic. Our minds and bodies are deeply connected. SCP-1025 exaggerates that relationship into supernatural horror, but the seed of the idea comes from reality. Perhaps that's why it lingers. Because somewhere deep down, we've all read about an illness and wondered, wait, do I have that? The SCP simply imagines a universe where the answer is always yes. And suddenly, every page becomes a gamble. Every chapter becomes a diagnosis. Every act of curiosity carries a cost. Books are often portrayed as symbols of hope. They preserve history. They spread ideas. They connect generations separated by centuries. But horror has always understood that books can also be dangerous. They can reveal secrets, summon monsters, destroy civilizations, or in the case of SCP-1025, rewrite the reader. Perhaps that's why this anomaly remains one of the SCP Foundation's most memorable creations. It doesn't rely on jump scares or grotesque imagery. Instead, it quietly exploits something we all do every day. We read, and once knowledge enters the mind, it cannot be easily removed. Imagine finding the Encyclopedia tomorrow. Would you resist opening it? Would curiosity overcome caution? Would you tell yourself that one page couldn't possibly hurt? Or would you walk away, never knowing whether you escaped a harmless old book or the most dangerous library volume ever written? Some questions are safer left unanswered, and some books should remain closed forever. Thank you for joining me for another episode of the Morbid Witch Podcast. To all my witches and wanderers, thank you for your continued support, your messages, your theories, your ratings, and your willingness to venture into the strange with me week after week. This community wouldn't exist without you. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. And if you're listening on Spotify, please take a moment to leave a rating. You can also listen to the Morbid Witch Podcast on iHeartRadio and Pandora. Until next time, stay strange, stay spooky, and remember, the shadows are always watching.